think, like a lot of people, I've been incredibly shocked and shook by the death of Stephen Twitch Boss. He died by suicide earlier this week, and I can't speak to his personal state or experience or motives, but I can sure as hell relate to the feeling of not wanting to be here and being in so much pain and anguish for a variety of reasons that it just seems impossible. Someone like him who gives such light and love and energy all the time, you know, it is hard to fathom on one hand, and yet it's also really totally understandable on the other. And I'm really triggered by the whole thing. I have a lot of compassion, especially for anyone that was close with him. And I have been dealing with a similar loss the past few years, and it's been very difficult. I thought at 5 years I would be able to talk about it, and it's almost been 5 years since Tim Bergling, or Avicii as he was better known, took his life in 2018. And at the time, I had been working very closely with him for about a week just before he left Los Angeles and died a few weeks later. And that time that I was with him, I already was so impacted by, because it felt like I had finally met somebody that was so similar in many ways to me and what I had experienced in my life, even though on the surface our lives were completely different, and I didn't know the degree to which he had achieved success and fame in this world, because I wasn't familiar with his work as Avicii. But I had met Tim, and within 20 minutes was completely just overjoyed and overwhelmed and scared and fascinated and excited to be there with him, because he was so beautiful as a person and had such an open heart and mind, and was a seeker of truth and enlightenment, and a deep thinker, and a powerful soul, an extremely sensitive soul. And I was so excited. I was so excited. And I can still see him walking up the stairs. See, I thought 5 years surely would be long enough where I could talk about this and not cry. And all I wanted to do is talk about it and share what I experienced. It's the most painful thing I've ever experienced. And it's also the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced. What I shared with him before and after his death is so beautiful and actually so crazy. It's so crazy, and I've been so afraid to share it because people judge everything, and they'll judge me, and they'll say I'm crazy and, you know, seeking fame or money or whatever nonsense BS people will say that has made me afraid to share any bit of my truth and my experience. And it's so isolating. It's terribly isolating. The time that I was with him was for instruction in meditation, and that's something that I have always kept incredibly private. It's sacred. It's sacred to me. It's such a special experience for anyone learning meditation and really diving, into their own being and utilizing that tool to get peace of their mind and their heart and their soul and their body getting rest. It's such a precious, intimate, personal experience. And I'd also signed an NDA, working with him. And I've worked for other musicians, and that was standard. And that's just standard. I did also, when I was sitting with him, have many personal discussions, and he had asked me to help people understand him. And I had really bizarre experiences, even leading me to be there to work with him. I had dreams about it just before we met. I had dreams about certain aspects of our connection that would come to fruition over the next few months and few years after we met. I had experiences sitting with him where I would get just really strong, overwhelming intuitions. And one of them, and it happened like right away, about 20 minutes after meeting him, when we were having a pretty profound conversation, and he said some things that were very insightful, that were incredibly beautiful, that totally blew me away, because it was so clear that he was kind of a genius and really wanting next level experiences and understanding of reality and why we're here and what's possible. It was so clear that he wanted it all. And actually, it kind of reminds me of Ellen DeGeneres, who my friend and mentor had also taught meditation, and he's been on her show. And she talks about when she wanted to learn meditation, she said the reason why was she wanted to be in touch with that divine source energy that was in charge of everything in the universe. And I'm paraphrasing, so don't quote me on that, but it was that idea. And it was something like this with Tim. What he said was so beautiful. And I just looked at him, I was like, why did you ask me that? Like, why, what is going on here? Who are you? And I was totally blown away. My heart completely opened. I was like, okay, I'm here for this person. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to show up. I'm just going to work with him and support him in any way that I can. And I really, truly thought we had a lot of time and that I would see him again. And obviously that didn't happen. And not only did I sign an NDA of the time that I was working with him, but also it is so difficult for me to still, and perhaps always will be, I don't know, but it is extremely difficult for me to think about and talk about the time that I was with him, because I still will spiral into continuous, nonstop thoughts, the replay of the conversations that I could have had with him, what could have been done, what I could have done differently, what could be done differently in society, institutionally, this is just systemically changing things so that we have better tools, understanding, compassion, support, just resources for people when they're struggling and when they feel like the pain is so overwhelming. And yes, mental health resources, physical resources, even right now, like I have had tremendous physical pain that has been exacerbated as a result of the trauma of experiencing this kind of loss. And I know that I'm not alone in this. I just don't happen to have direct contact or communication with many others who also experience this, particularly with Tim, but in general, I mean, even for myself, I tried to find grief support groups. I tried to find survivors of suicide support groups. I was in Los Angeles, and I ended up leaving Los Angeles just so that I could go rest and meditate and get help, get trauma therapy, get different, physical treatments, trauma treatments, spiritual work. I was working with many different spiritual mentors and health providers that I have met along the way. And I don't want to make this just about my experience and my pain, but I also do just want to share a little bit of insight, the level of depth and pain that people have when somebody they know dies suddenly. And I, to be fair, have a lot of friends who have had family members or friends pass away who had, ongoing chronic illnesses, who passed away, and they still felt like they could have done more or said or done things differently. It's very, very challenging. And I do see, there's a lot of really beautiful things that can be done in the process of healing from grief. And one of them that I have utilized and that I do find to be very helpful, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos of other people doing the same thing. In the US, there are so many TV shows with psychic mediums like Matt Frazier, the Long Island Medium, Teresa Caputo, Tyler Henry, the Hollywood Medium. And I see the readings that they do with people and the positive transformation that it can have when they are able to convey very personal messages from their loved ones who have passed away. And I also see the comments of people saying these people are scammers, they're liars, this phenomenon isn't real. And I get that. I think it's a very hard thing to understand or relate to if you haven't had that experience. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are not legit mediums. They're not legit psychics. They use other tools to extract information and deduce and make, assessment based on just reading the person or guessing or, sort of fishing for information. But there are also a lot of very real, legit people with abilities to communicate with people who have passed away. And myself, this is not something that I had really talked about much growing up. It was very difficult for me. I often had accurate psychic premonition dreams nightly for months when I was a teenager. I would sometimes hear and see people who had passed away, and this is how I would know that they had passed away. I would see either like a 3D holographic image of somebody in front of me, or I would have an audible conversation. And this was something that in a way was just so natural, especially when I had a grandparent pass away who I was very close with, and I knew that they were around me. I had been very close with them before they passed away, and taking care of you know, their health and their body, and even after they passed away. And I felt their love and support and guidance around me all the time. And it wasn't even something that like I talked about with friends or family. It was just this very sweet presence that was there. And I think a big reason that I really was able to pull myself out of a really dark place and hitting rock bottom, and I had gone through a lot of struggles with drugs and alcohol and health issues, and it was in that state that I started meditating again. And I had learned transcendental meditation when I was a child, but I didn't do it for many years. And I really came to it, you know, as a dedicated practitioner out of complete desperation, because I didn't know if I was going to survive my rock bottom. I really felt like I would die, like many of my friends had already, from drug overdoses or suicide or other. And when I sat down and closed my eyes for the first time in meditation, since I was a child, the last time I had meditated, I was 10 years old. And at this time I was 17, and I had been partying really hard and had had mono and infections and all kinds of issues that that nearly took me out, quite frankly. And I had low-grade chronic pancreatitis and many issues that were not good. And I closed my eyes, and it was just like this intense wave of peace just completely enveloped me. I was just floating in peace and love, and just like this soft cushioning light. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I still I've been meditating pretty much every day since. That was in 1995, actually. And now it's 2022, almost 2023. And that experience and many, many others that I've had in meditation have really kept me going, have inspired me, has inspired creativity, has inspired love, a deep feeling of connection and understanding, and motivation, and clarity of vision, and clarity of purpose, of who I am, why I'm here, what I'm here to do. It's motivated me to become a meditation teacher, to help others gain that experience, to inspire as many people to meditate as much as possible. Not that everyone has to meditate, but anything that we can do to create more peace and love and joy and happiness and relief from sorrow, relief from pain, because there's just so much in this world all the time. And anyone who watches the news, who looks at Instagram, any social media, there's constant inspiration, there's constant joy, there's constant laughter. There's also constant pain, constant war, constant murder, constant injustice. constant fear of destruction of our planet, constant fear of survival, financial worries. How am I going to eat? How am I going to pay the rent? Right now, this is a question that I have all the time. I have dedicated a lot of my time to spiritual development. I spent my entire 20s living in spiritual centers and ashrams, and in my 30s teaching meditation and working with, David Lynch and Bob Roth and the David Lynch Foundation, which has taught, I don't know, maybe even over 1 million people how to meditate now around the world, transforming the lives of people suffering with trauma, helping children develop their full potential, their full creative potential, and just getting a glimpse of that moment of peace that we sometimes experience in our meditation. Because why be here and suffer and live in hatred and anger and misery all the time? Sometimes we just don't know any other way, and it can seem impossible to get out of the systemic injustice, the systemic oppression. It can feel like there's no support, there's no love, nobody cares. People say they care, but they only care if you look like them, or you have the same beliefs as them, or you worship the same God, or team, sports team, political team. Anything that is different is seen as a threat. And we lash out, we judge, and it's so hard just to feel like you can be seen and heard and respected. Sometimes death can just also seem like a really beautiful option. Like, surely it must be better. Either we just are going to end the body and there's nothing, which is probably what a lot of people believe, or we leave the body, and what a lot of people describe is the immense love that they feel when they're on the other side. When they're not in the body, they don't have the physical pain. If you have ever listened to people describe what they experience in near-death experiences, this is really common. And I have listened to probably hundreds at this point, maybe even thousands of people talk about their near-death experiences over the last few years. And I've listened to and read a lot about the research done on near-death experiences. And I think it's a really fascinating topic for the exploration and explanation of consciousness and what it is, because scientists can't identify where consciousness is generated from in the brain or the body. We can see where there are certain experiences like vision, sight, smell, or sensations, but even things like emotions are still not fully understood. And I know that for a lot of people, the idea of an afterlife, there can often be a religious context or an understanding of it from a religious background, or a disbelief in it, period. And to each their own. And I don't think that any of us have the exact answer. I do come from a background that is very Eastern influenced because I grew up in a family of 4 generations of people who had dedicated study to meditation practice and very Indian, Hindu, Vedic influenced, knowledge and philosophy, including the Bhagavad Gita, which is ancient literature from the Mahabharata that talks about the continuation of consciousness. It's a discourse, conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, who was on the battlefield. And it's all about consciousness and how we can utilize and access the laws of nature that are available to us, the support and power that comes from the field of consciousness. And I think that's one way to put it. I think also we have angels, spirit guides, spirit teams of beings, of our soul family, our loved ones, our friends and family who have passed away, who look after us, who help keep us on track, who help us fulfill our soul's purpose, who help us meet the people in our lives that we're meant to meet and to be with and to work with and to play with and to love. And I don't mean to be lovers or our romantic partners. I mean to love, to be in love together and to share love without any expectation or need or anything for it to be more, for it to be romantic or sexual. And those things too. But just love itself. It's so beautiful. And it's, I think, the most important thing. And the reason also why it hurts so much when people we love are no longer here in the physical form. And yet they're around us oftentimes. We have friends and family and loved ones who are around us. And like I said, I had experienced this a lot when I was a child, and I had had a lot of validation of this experience working with other people, other spiritual mentors and psychics and medical intuitives who had perceived this, that I was having this experience. And I was, I don't want to say afraid, but I was, because it was kind of a new, different thing that, even though I was actually really interested in this phenomena when I was a child, I even would write like essays and papers for school and elementary school about ESP and other weird stuff, other types of phenomenon that was kind of inexplicable and beyond our limited understanding of consciousness and perception, and how we utilize the 5 senses to see the world around us. But there is so much more in other dimensions that we don't always see and feel, but some people do. And those of us that are that sensitive, that are empaths, that might feel or see or perceive things that maybe not everyone else can, it's very isolating. And it can be terrifying if you don't know what to do with it. And I didn't know what to do with it for many years. I still don't really fully know what to do with it, but I know that me just ignoring it or shutting it off actually was, I think, on one hand, helpful at the time. On the other hand, it was kind of like shutting off a part of myself, and partly because I didn't have anyone to support me through it. It took me many years to find people like that who could support me through it. And a lot of that happened after Tim passed away. And as a direct result of Tim and my experiences and my communication with him, even after he passed away. And it's very easy to judge that any kind of communication with anyone in the afterlife. I think that comes from different religions, even a lot of spiritual teachers and traditions I know that are very not encouraging of speaking with people who have passed away. And one of the reasons I think is that people can get very sort of stuck in between the experience of passing away and moving on into whatever is beyond. And I don't know, but I think it's really beautiful. And I think that there are many, many, many different experiences that people can have in between lifetimes. And I have heard many interpretations and theories about what happens in between lifetimes and where people go after they die, who have died either by suicide or other tragic means. And I don't think any of us know. And I don't think that there is any particular wrong or right. My belief had been, and in many ways still is, that the thing to do when people pass is to think of them with love and to pray for them and to wish them well on their journey wherever they're going. And yet that's also sometimes extremely difficult to do because of the pain, because we don't fully understand what happens when we die. We don't fully understand why we're here. It sucks. It hurts to lose loved ones like that. And yet sometimes having that connection and communication can be extremely healing. And sometimes it can be extremely rewarding. And in many ways, the spiritual experiences that I've had since Tim passed has been beyond the craziest, wildest, most beautiful things I possibly could have imagined. And I have had friends and family who have been around me to support me through it. But it really is something that I want to share at some point. And when or how exactly that will be, I don't know. My plan in 2018, the week that Tim died, it had already been to start writing about my personal experiences in life, my spiritual experiences, my perspective on life and the afterlife, and the field of possibilities that is really limitless, and what we are capable of as human beings, and also the trauma and difficulties and struggles that are very real and that are part of life. And that it's easy to ignore or dismiss or be in resistance to those and be in complete overwhelm because we don't know how to deal with them. That's totally natural, I think, because we're not geared as a society to live our life in happiness and health and wholeness. The complete opposite, actually. We're thrown into a system where we're slaves to society and our jobs and having to make money and, really not living our potential, even the slightest fraction of our potential as human beings. And that's not to say that like working or money or anything like that is bad, because you can be completely fulfilled doing anything for work and your family. And it always has completely boggled my mind to the point where, like, I really have wondered how everyone on the planet seems to show up for school and jobs and things that, they're not totally excited about, or they seem to be excited and content just going about this routine of like working, eating, playing, and that's it. And I don't understand. Being human is weird. It's hard. It's so fucking difficult sometimes. I can 1000% relate to the idea, the feeling of just not wanting to be here anymore all the time since I was a young child. I used to lock myself in my bathroom so that I would not kill myself, so that I would not go out. I was in Seattle in the 90s. So, in the 80s and 90s, I would literally lock myself in my bathroom so that I wouldn't go out and get heroin and kill myself. I would literally sit in my room in fear and terror of a lot of things that I didn't fully realize really until this past year, that had impacted me immensely as a child. And I live with conditions called misophonia and misokinesia, which are extreme panic and rage and feeling that you're dying and being attacked. And I don't believe that everyone who has this has experienced some sort of early childhood trauma, but I did, and I don't think that my body knew how to handle them. And I just lived in a constant state of panic. Not constant, to be fair, but frequent and nearly all the time when I was at home. And so I left home and lived on the streets when I was a teenager and came back to meditation after being on the streets for a few years. And I still have these conditions. They still affect every relationship, everything that I do in my life. And yet I've also had tools. I've also had, loving support from family and friends, really good therapists at times, really terrible therapists at other times. And that's a whole other story that I'm not going to get into, but my heart goes out to anyone experiencing the pain of not knowing why and how. It could be that somebody so bright and full of light and who brought so much joy to so many millions of people around the world could feel like They couldn't bear the pain of being here anymore. And it's easy to say they had all the resources. They had all the tools. They had access to everything. It's easy to say, that's selfish. It may not be easy to open your heart and mind to the pain and suffering that others are going through. Because to do so is very vulnerable. And also makes us look and feel our own inadequacies, our own pain, our own grief. My desire and prayer is that we can all find peace, love, happiness, joy, bliss, wonder, acceptance, humility, understanding, compassion, resolution, forgiveness, kindness, and willingness to grow in these qualities and willingness to accept the parts of us that are painful, that have yet to be healed, and that hinder us from living our full potential as human beings. These bodies, although I don't believe that they are the generator of our consciousness, they're rather like, a cell phone that we can receive calls from, we can get a lot of information from, and they're pretty sophisticated. It's a very sophisticated technology with a very highly advanced nervous system that can emanate and radiate consciousness and love and power to really be and live a life that is so much more fulfilling and meaningful and satisfying than what we may have lived up until this point. And for a lot of people, they're happy, they're satisfied. You might be one of those people, but it could even be more. And I truly believe that when there are others suffering so greatly on the planet, especially when it's because of lack of basic things like food, shelter, peace of mind, feeling of safety, maybe not even in their own homes. People might not even feel safe with their own family members, their partners, their spouses, their bosses, their coworkers, people on the streets. I just mean people like, walking by, driving, the rage and anger, violence, sometimes totally unmotivated and out of nowhere. We live in a scary world. And in some places, that threat of violence or death is so far beyond the comprehension that a lot of us can even begin to think of. And yeah, a lot of people in the world have all kinds of privileges. A lot of us have privileges that we may not even recognize. And a lot of us have pains and sufferings that we may not share. that we may not express. And it's hard to feel like anyone else in the world feels that way, especially when we're looking at things like social media and the illusion of perfection, constant positivity, toxic positivity is so prevalent. And I don't think that it's like necessary or helpful to wallow in our pain and trauma and sorrow all the time. And sometimes just forgetting about all that and letting go and having fun or meditating or partying or dancing or whatever the hell it is that you want to do, just to let go and release and forget and move on. Sometimes that's the best approach too. I hope that we can all experience more love while we're here in these bodies on this planet. There's more than